And my guest speaker this morning is Jess Scully from Vivid. She's running Vivid for many years now, 8 years. So it's, as you know, a big event in Sydney, one of the biggest events in Australia. And she's always looking for money. And, and I asked Jess to share, you heard many stories this morning. So what are your key learnings for you to go back to Vivid next week? What can you share with us?
Wow, thank you for inviting me, Corinne. This morning's been really fascinating, and I was lucky enough to see Damien's presentation at Communicating the Museum a couple of years ago, and to me that was one of the most insightful presentations I've ever seen about the need for a distinctive identity and claiming a space. And I think Adele put it very beautifully this morning when she said, don't be afraid to go where you're not expected. And I think that sort of boldness and that ability to claim a position in a landscape that doesn't exist yet is precisely the kind of innovation that Damien has spoken about. So, yeah, I think there's so much there, actually. If you don't mind, I'll go back to a few things that I made note of from this morning. Some of the key points that I heard discussed were, those two words we hear a lot about are engagement and impact, two words which can become quite meaningless. But this morning I thought we heard two very good descriptions of how they need to be reconsidered. Particularly in terms of impact, wherever your funding comes from, whether it's from the government, whether it's corporate, whether it's individual philanthropy or crowdfunding, you're always going to need to quantify your impact. And, as Damien said, the ABS has stopped collecting a lot of really key arts stats. So it's hard for us now to identify the impact in terms of the numbers from that broader level and say, 88% of Australians engage with culture on an annual basis. So we're going to have to find new ways of measuring our own impact. And I really liked the way that Emma this morning talked about using data and new channels of communications to measure, track and amplify that impact. And I think we need to develop as a sector new ways of measuring our own impact and telling our own stories.
Actually, that was the opening keynote yesterday by Deloitte.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, about economic impact, which was also different. Damien, you just raised the iconic opera house, also the iconic impact, so all was very important. And we also raised how important it was to value your return on investment for your sponsors. So yes, definitely.
So impact
much more
was
than
huge.
Before. Okay.
Absolutely. And the other phrase, or the other idea I thought was really crucial was around engagement, and from the idea of engaging with your audience not as you wish they were, but as they actually are. And I think that is something that many sectors are guilty of, but particularly the arts sectors. Why don't our audience like this offering? Why do they come to us for the coffee at the South Bank as opposed to buying tickets? And I think it's about that open-mindedness and inclusive approach to say, the coffee downstairs is a gateway drug to get people into the public programs, to then get people into the ticketed programs, or perhaps they stay at those public program level. And I think that inclusiveness and the respect for your audience and their different areas of interest, I thought was a really wonderful point from Chris's talk this morning as well. And I also really loved when Zoe from the Philharmonie talked about being open to every kind of public. And that to me kind of signified that inclusiveness, the generosity of offering the rooftop or offering the public program, that idea of giving something away to contribute back to public life, and then hope that people are intrigued and encouraged by that to then engage with programs they might find more difficult or inaccessible. So I found that really engaging from this morning.
Okay, well, very good. I remember a story a couple of years ago. We were in Stockholm, and Mark, you were there. I don't know if you remember when Mark Sands from Tate talked about us, about the tone of voice.
Yes.
And he gave a very funny example about Nick Serota. You know, Nick Serota is a quite wonderful man, very academic and very scientific. And he said, you know, I'm really struggling, but the people, writing comments on the digital, they're not very bright. I mean, the comments on the social media are really not very bright. And Mark Sands said, you know, Nick, this is our audience, and you have to respect the audience. And it's all about, you know, the audience and how you are opening to them. And as you say, it's not as you wish they are, but as they are. Yeah. So that's very true.
Another point, I really enjoyed the conversation with Adele and Zoe, and I think the Institute for Du Monde Arabe, it sounds fascinating. I mean, what a brilliant position to take, and also what self-awareness to understand your competitive advantage, which is the network, as Adele pointed out. And I think many of us don't understand our competitive advantage. We understand our institutions or our events or our organisations as they have occurred, as we see them, as they've been presented to us, as they've been presented historically. But to understand what other people might derive, the value they might derive from engaging with you and leading with that, I think is such a thoughtful approach and requires a great deal of self-assessment, asking the difficult questions, slaughtering the sacred cows, all the rest of it. So that was absolutely brilliant. And then the other thing which came up in our conversation earlier with the group I'm sitting with, this idea about getting engagement within your organisation, I think, is also a large obstacle for many people, and in many different sectors and not just in the arts. But how do you actually get the broader organisation to reconnect with a new mission, or to reconsider their models, or to, you know, as we're talking about the B word, the M word, all of those words, how do you get everyone back on board? And it may be easier with the new organisation or with new leadership, but with existing organisations and existing memberships, it can be very hard to shake things up to their core. So I think that's probably the key challenge I saw from today.
Excellent. So, I mean, engagement came back. I mean, everything you said. So inside and audience engagement and inside engagement. You were talking also about impact, economic impact, inclusiveness around your brand, and also understand your competitive advantage. But what you started with was look outside, was very crucial. So thank you very much, Jess, for sharing these thoughts with you. Thank you to the speakers of this morning. I think they were really very inspirational. That was really great to hear all these international experience. And now I invite you to go for lunch.